Hi everyone, Skeptic Fox here. So the other day Andi Warski uploaded a video called White Savory Isn't Too Bad, which is basically a response to a video published by Blaque, who responds to this email.
Hey Kat, first I wanted to say that I think you're so brave for speaking on the issues of race, the LGBTQIA+ community, and so much more. Your videos have been very helpful to me and my friends, and I thank you for that. In a nutshell, one of my white friends, we'll call her Rebecca, of over 8+ years sent me a long rant about something race related, and I told her that I disagreed and then tried to educate her, but she wouldn't listen to me. She literally uses every white feminist, white supremacist rhetoric you could think of, and she's vehement in defending her white privilege and her white fragility. I have unfriended her as now, and we are no longer friends. My biggest question is, while talking to her, the most difficult thing I had to deal with was, how do I talk to white people who use the Italian, Irish, Jewish, Catholic, Russian oppression to say that they do experience racism as a white person?
Now, I'm not going to cover the whole video, as Andi Warski pretty much said everything there is to be said. However, I am going to focus on the part of the video where they start talking about slavery, as this is something I've studied in the past. I'm currently studying now at university level, so hopefully now I can add some facts to the argument, as well as providing some of my own opinions to the subject.
First of all, the Irish were definitely enslaved, and not in the same way that Black people were enslaved. I think it's important to understand that there are several different types of slavery. Most of the Irish were in indentured servitude, essentially.
Amazingly, when she says this, she's not actually wrong. There was a difference between someone in servitude and someone being a slave. For example, it was common for people to sell themselves into servitude in order to pay for the transatlantic journey over to America. It also sometimes just made more financial sense than running your own plot of land. However, it should be said at this point though that there were occasions where people were kidnapped and forced into servitude. So key differences should be noted between being a slave and being someone in servitude. For example, you were protected by the law a lot better if you were someone in servitude. You tended to serve somewhere between 3 and 7 years or up until the age of 21. And after this time, you would be given financial reward for your service. You were basically getting your pay at the end. Slaves, on the other hand, were slaves for life, and any children that the slaves had would also become slaves and be property of the slave owner. And they were generally treated a lot worse. And you were only really a slave if you were black, so being a slave was racial. However, Andi Warski is 100% right when he says this.
Africans sold African slaves?
People don't tend to talk about how these slaves became slaves in the first place. Usually it was due to African native customs. That being that when a native tribe went to war with another native tribe, the losers were usually taken as slaves and then sold off to companies such as the East India Trading Company. It should also be remembered the percentage of the population that actually owned slaves. Now, in the South, this was around about 6% of white people, but if you take America as a whole, this lowers to about 1.6% of white people. However, if you take the percentage of freed black people that own slaves, this is about 25% of them. And the very first black slave owner in the United States was a black man called Anthony Johnson.
However, what people need to understand about the Irish when they came to America is that they were not considered white.
Now, when it came to Irish people being oppressed, their colour of the skin really had nothing to do with it. It was more to do with their belief system, as Ireland was a Catholic country. Therefore, most of the people coming from Ireland were Catholic. Now, most arrivals to America were some form of Protestant, which caused a lot of conflict. I mean, this is why the English and the Spanish had such a fierce rivalry between 1500 and 1850. But these things only really apply when we're talking about the transatlantic slave trade. If we look worldwide, then white people were actually being enslaved, in some cases by black people. For example, between 1530 and 1780, Europeans were being enslaved by people from North Africa. White people were also enslaved by the Ottoman Empire and the Turks. And today it's believed that there are 20 million slaves or even 30 million slaves. And this isn't based on race at all. This could be white, Asian, black, whatever. If you go back far enough through history, you will find a way to make yourself feel oppressed. For example, I'm Welsh. At one point we were oppressed by the English. I'm bisexual. At one point LGBT people were oppressed. And I'm an atheist. So at another point of history, I would have been oppressed for that. But I am not oppressed today for any of those three things. Also, as I showed earlier, although being a slave in the Transatlantic Empire was racial, being a slave owner wasn't racial. So, if you say that white people owe black people an apology for something that happened over 150 years ago, what about the black people that owed slaves? Do they have to apologize as well? And what if the white people's family weren't actually part of the slave trade at all? I mean, for the most part, it didn't even benefit white people, as why would you hire someone when you could get a slave to do it for a one-off fee? This "we had it worst" attitude that she shows through this entire video, it's sort of made a bit redundant, as she's never gone through this. Her ancestors probably did, but she fucking didn't. So I'm gonna end by saying this. Stop playing the victim card and stop dividing people, because the only person spreading hate and racial intolerance is you. I'm the Skeptic Fox. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.